Okay, I guess we're having some technical difficulties. So and Winter, I invited you to talk. Okay, so we're gonna jump right into it, essentially. Right off the bat, I'd like to welcome everyone to this week's podcast, and we're gonna have quite a bit to go through in terms of the recent development progress related to co-op, related to the horde maps, and just generally getting everything back into a fully playable state. Ephraim will be jumping in potentially a little bit later in. Let me see. There we go. And we'll just kind of go from there. Oh, so now their Discord broke. You good, Winner?
Check.
Okay. It's a Discord
okay,
bug where
fixed.
if you guys join before I do, then my audio breaks. I have to join the podcast channel first, and I don't know why it happens. The weird podcast bug. But anyhow, we're gonna get right into it. Actually, I want to let Ephraim speak first because I talk so much. So, Ephraim, do you have the floor to talk about Alcatraz?
We're doing Alcatraz first.
Oh, Winner, do you want to give your introduction real fast?
No, it's fine. It's what am I even here for?
No, you're fine. I was just rolling with the punches because we were having some technical difficulties there.
Yeah, it's technical difficulty. Would you? I can.
Yeah, do it.
Do the intro. Take us over everything. So I've written down. Okay. Take 2, everyone. All right. Nothing else happened. All right. The podcast has just started.
Deal.
All right. Deal. Cool. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cepheus Protocol podcast. For today, we'll be going over some of the programming work, such as early building placement for income buildings. Robert was just showing me the SOC placement, as well as some of the continued work on multiplayer synchronization for things like building and repairing, like on walls, which I think we already encountered a bug with the synchronization there. We'll also look at some of the efforts towards first gameplay tests, such as an early horde map being worked on to test combat and fix critical bugs in that area, like enemies not dying or ignoring each other. And finally, we'll go over some other areas like art and model work, some new civilian weapons for rebel units, and the boring people who aren't us. The new upcoming Cirque turret, which personally I love, and another short update on Alcatraz with some of the work that's been done on that between the last podcast.
I wanted to give Ephraim the spotlight. So Ephraim, do you want to go first?
Yeah, no, we can start with that.
Yeah,
for
we
sure.
can hear you. I got the map up. Where would you like me to start?
Well, this week, mainly been working on more of the buildings. Got the electric shop done near the guard house. Got the new industries building in the back, which is that huge, long building at the back of the island facing San Francisco, I believe. And the model industries building. Yeah, those are pretty much done. Next up, I'm going to be working on the powerhouse, I believe is what it's called, or the power station, which is a series of a few buildings that are kind of connected on the cliffside next to the officers club. I think I'm going to one-off that one because it's a pretty complex structure. And yeah, it's going to have like some stairways going down into this little dock on the side of the cliff, the sea cliff. That's kind of cool. After that, the ruined buildings, which of course are the warden's house and the officers club, those are also going to be one-offs. Those are going to be probably the easiest ones, so I'm leaving those for last. After that, the lighthouse. The lighthouse is going to be a little more complicated. I mean, well, not that complicated. It's a simple structure, but it does have a good amount of detail in it. And I've also been looking into, mega scans. I haven't put any of them in yet, but I've been looking through the foliage in the mega scans to see what we're going to be putting up in the gardens. There is a lot of vegetation that I'm going to have to try to match to the best of what's available with the mega scans, but a lot to look through, especially for textures. Once I start UV mapping and texturing all this stuff, what you see right now, of course, on the buildings is just stand-in stuff because I wanted to add a little bit of color on some of those buildings to kind of see how the details pop in or how it looks. Beyond that, once all that stuff is done, it's really adding more detail to some of the models, like with the gardens. You have all those demolished officers' housing that is mostly just foundations now, and it's been converted into a garden. So it's just going to be, after the buildings are done, looking at textures and other stuff to start, adding more and more detail into the structures as far as like, the wear and tear that you see on the buildings. Oh, what else? Are we going to be doing new trees, or are we going to use the same
and
old
just buy
speed
new
tree
ones
stuff?
and manufacture them ourselves. We have to just get to that point in the coming weeks.
And we are like, one thing I noticed, like, what we have in the project right now isn't the same as what we have in the previous
We have
one.
to
Are
migrate
we actually
everything
going to
over.
change like the
It's just more
landscape
so we're
texture?
waiting for pandemic mode to get
Oh,
to the
all
point
right.
where production starts on that.
All right, because right now I've just been looking at foliage and some of the wall textures to use. Of course, I'm gonna have to take some of those and probably combine them in either Quixel or Substance. Most likely Quixel, because it does have like a pretty good setup for mixing and matching a lot of those textures to add the wear and tear. And let's see what else. Beyond that, just set dressing the island more, to get it closer and closer to completion. But it's coming along, and with the limited amount of time I've got to work on it while I'm doing the job search and trying to scrounge up money and odd jobs. I wish I could have done more, but
there.
it's coming. I mean, it's getting done.
So anything else you guys want to mention podcast wise, Winter and Duravar?
Hold on, I'm gonna pull up the map right now too to see what
I'm
else I
like
forgot to
pressing
talk
buttons.
about.
I'm like, how do I unmute? Shit. On Alcatraz and areas?
Just in general.
Or just no, I mean I'm always excited to see
So
the
one of the
continued
biggest
work on
things is
but,
essentially just kind of getting it to where a lot of like these little external details are situated. Like last week when we talked about it, a lot of these aspects were like hollowed out. They were empty. There wasn't much like layers to it. So you can see he's been kind of going through and just kind of cutting out the doorways and the windows and just kind of adding on all the little nuances that you would see in the real life version. And slowly but surely, he's been kind of
Yeah.
going from one section to another in terms of just establishing it. 1 second. Let me fix that for the people on Discord. Okay, and then basically just kind of going through and just getting like the different decos and everything else established, like getting the back areas all situated. So it's been just kind of like getting all those details and slowly but surely just kind of baking it in as you go. So in a nutshell, that's everything we have to show for Alcatraz. Now we're gonna move on to the next thing. Derek's here. Derek, do you want to talk about what you've been working on?
Hold on. Are we still having technical difficulty?
Hello.
Howdy.
Surprise guest.
How's it been going? All right. Hello. All right. For what I've been working on here, it's a lot. You've been seeing some of the stuff inside of the daily update blogs because I have been spending a lot of the time primarily on the widgetry, the pop-ups and things like that. But since we were wanting to work on an internal playtest, I've been instead shifted my focus over towards making sure that replication would work for combat, and that meant getting combat online. The project setup that we have right now was set up initially around some of the third-person controls, and the AI was set up to respect that. So I was updating a lot of the AI in order to be able to function inside of the RTS environment. So this is such as a threat evaluation, being able to see each other, making sure the infected can react to player units, and basically getting all that functional and online and not crashing. On top of, and as you can see the daily updates blog, which I posted there, or the multiplayer technically is able to work at a basic degree, although a lot of the surrounding functionality, such as the tweaking the horde or logic to feel a bit better when you're playing it, some additional navigation adjustments for walls to make sure the infected can approach them correctly rather than always dodging them. But it's a bunch of little tweaks in order to take it a couple steps farther, but it's been a lot of progress this week. Sorry, I'm asthmatic. I'm running a little low on air right now, if that makes sense. So I'm going to let Robert take back over the stage here.
The biggest thing for what Derek's been working on is essentially getting it to where we had a preliminary horde map that 2 players could play on where we essentially just kind of spawn in the infected at different like times based off of the waves. And then from there, you're able to essentially like, defend the location. There are quite a few bugs, and this is the first logical step towards having a full co-op playtest is us playtesting it for all of the isolated systems that we've constructed over the last couple of weeks. And then getting it to where like, okay, like we got the base building where we like it, the co-op is working, the infected are functioning, their AI is working, they understand how to target and do target acquisition and all the other fun stuff when it comes from the circ to the infected, so like I can build, say, a guard tower or like a spotlight, and they would understand like, oh, hey, I need to go and attack or blah, 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 blah. Now, in this map, it can be a little bit buggy in times when it comes to their spawns because we're still working on the replication side of that. So you can see like, here's a system where they just kind of free fall and they pull their chutes and they land. But then the infected are coming in and it's replicated. Some of them die, some of them don't. And there's this weird little bug where sometimes like their locations don't update. So like it happens sometimes where like they'll shoot, but like their animation cycles, like something's going on with their movement. So we have to fix that going into Monday, is essentially just kind of go through and figure out like where in our combat logic does it allow them to do that? Like that's the new hit reaction system, but it's allowing them to do that. Whereas for some reason, and I think I know what that is, that's the animation blueprint that I wasn't able to get in this week, where what's happening is that they don't have a proper shooting state like the operators do. So I have to go in and just fix that. That's an animation blueprint issue. But the issue of them not being able to shoot and hit their targets, that's something having to do with replication. Somewhere in our math, there's a desynchronization that's not being replicated or synchronized between clients. Because if I were to play this same exact map on a host with no multiplayer introduced, it'd work just fine. I think you figure they're trying to come to the gate and destroy it on this little dirty map. And the goal is that going into like next Saturday is to work out all of these kinks so they actually know, hey, look, maybe I should stop and tear off the limbs of the guy in front of me instead of bypassing to the gate. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. All this came in on the 11th hour going into like last night at like midnight, I think, from my understanding. So it's one of those things where like this is something we're going to be working on going into the week, because you can see they're bugging out right now. They're not attacking the gate properly. But this is, again, the first go.
Yeah, the gate. Yeah, the gate there was still set up from the third-person horde mode, and I was rushing to try to get this map up and running and just basically testing it, seeing what features didn't work and fixing it. And since the gate was set up for the third-person horde mode stuff, I'm not that familiar with actually how it's actually set up, so I wasn't sure how to fix it. And on top of all the other things on top of fixing all the other things that I was working on, because the run commands, for example, weren't working on the client. So that was one thing that I had to fix up.
The barracks sometimes doesn't work on the client too, which is adorable. So we'll have to look into that going into Monday. Is sometimes when the client selects the barracks, it's like, maybe I won't show it.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I was getting things pushed into getting this technically functional enough to show off. But at the same time, we're going to have to just keep testing it and fixing a thing here, test it, find a thing, fix it, and repeat until it's in a better position.
That's the biggest thing right now, is that we have this test arena. Realistically, we're doing this in waves. This is our first incubator where we're just trying to get like the base combat, get the sandbags, the wall builder, get it to where they all function. And then once we're happy with this, ideally going into next week, then towards the end of the week, ideally, we'd switch over to the larger test map that I showed a couple weeks ago. Because you can see right now, like, okay, cool, it's working right now, and then it's going to break in the next 10, 20 seconds. So we got to figure out what in the fuck is causing them to break sometimes. We're like, oh, wait, it's great, it's working right now. People are dying, there's explosions going on, but then it broke for him. So it's one of those things where like we have to figure out like where in the, okay, that worked pretty damn well. He really didn't like that gate today. So yeah, it's in layers. It's very fluid in terms of like as we do it, and I think you guys can see that like we're gonna get to a place in the next couple of weeks where you guys are gonna have something to play. We just got to keep ironing out these kinks and just keep hitting it every week. One of the other things was like, Derek's big push to get all the stuff in. So he was getting all this configured and like, it's a lot of like stock weapons. We haven't scaled up the project and added in all of the weapons that are from Legacy yet until we're happy with the foundation and the base in terms of like, how does combat work? How does the abilities work? How do the weapons feel? and just kind of getting all of that ironed out from the fundamental standpoint. Like, here's another bug. This is the bug I was talking about, where like something's not updating on their weapon or their AI controller. So for some reason, they're not shooting the right location, because they're shooting, but they're not shooting the right location. So it's freaking hilarious. So yeah, that's just one of the things we'll be working on, and it's gonna be it'll be fluid, but we'll figure it out. And then let's see. Let me see. Anything else you want to go over, Derek, before we move on to the next section? Okay. So one thing I would say is that ideally next Saturday we'll try and aim for having like a full-on like thing, if we can, where like him and I are playing or someone else is playing, depending on how things go. I don't see why we can't with both of us combined on this. It's basically just going to be like, okay, Derek, you take these aspects of the bugs, I take this aspect of the bugs, and we just keep loading up this map on this test map until we can get to the point where it's so overwhelming that we have to start testing with another person. So then that way we can get the bugs that don't exist when like it's one person trying to play two clients at the same time. So yeah, that's going to be the directive or the vector we're going in. And then after we get all that situated, you'll start to see some of the other underlying systems come online. We decided early off that we weren't going to do the patrol and attack move just yet, so we could start to show some tangible gameplay and some other mechanics. And then once we get that going, and then you guys can get into this map and play it for yourself and see the tangible progress, then we'll go back and add in the patrol and the attack move. That's not as important here because of how small the map is. It doesn't matter. Right now we're just trying to figure out like what you see, the issues that exist when like it doesn't happen when you're testing it on an isolated case, but once you start to scale up the numbers and you have more variance going on, then other issues can present themselves, other bugs can present themselves. So that's fun. So that wraps up generally what we were working on for the programming, and this will form the basis of the horde mode for single player, for the RTS aspects and for the CPO aspects. So when we get this replicated, it will carry over to the operator aspect. Should I show that other test version you made, Derek, or no?
The other test map? No, it's not.
Okay, so I won't bother
as polished
with
as
that
this one.
Okay, well then that will conclude the progress that we've had for that, for programming this week. And let's see, we're going to go ahead and we're going to move on to what Michael's been working on. So Michael's been essentially just kind of going through and getting not that one. Michael's been going through and essentially just getting the basically like civilian models of weapons made for when we get back to pandemic mode, and we're working on dynamic civilian groups in the next couple probably like 2 or 3 weeks at this point. So then that way we have weapons that are more catered towards the militants and the civilians and the raiders. So each one will get their own distinct weapon suite or weapon set based off of what makes sense for them. So normal civilians would have like, basic M4s or like single shot M4s, low caliber magazines. The militants would be more like ex-military, so they'd have access to something that's a little bit less than Circ. And then the raiders will be somewhere in the between, where they'll kind of have like a wide spectrum of weapons, but they're not. It's going to be like that's the general assortment of what we're doing there, just to kind of give them a little bit more diversity this time around when it comes to them, so they're not just using the same weapons as Circ, and Michael can have a little more fun balancing them and making it to where there are pros and cons to each civilian group. Let's see. And then the next thing would be what Dimitri's been working on. So Dimitri has been rigging and skinning the replacement to the turrets in Legacy. It's been a big thing that we've talked about for the last year or so, is I've wanted to take the field turrets out and make them an engineered pet. And it was on the basis of essentially making it to where, like, remember anyone here ever grew up watching Aliens? Is that those turrets were always intended to be quick deployable emplacements that were very fragile, but they ended up being like a catch-all for basically all defense situations, and it didn't fit what I wanted and what I had in mind for the units. So we ended up pivoting there and essentially making it to where like early off in discussions a couple of months ago, like 6 months ago, we were like, okay, we're going to make the switch, and now we're making that switch as part of this new re-implementation, where the idea is we're going to be engineer will be able to build these. You'll have a MG version, which is this version, and then you'll have a rocket pod or like a rocket launcher version. That'll basically be the two different ones that you can switch between, and then you'll have like the two legacy turrets that are turrets you can deploy in the world, up to 3 max. And the idea is that you would use those to set up really quick fixed defenses with limited amount of ammo while you're trying to stave out time for other groups, other units to come up to supplement your forces. If a horde is coming in, and that's the general basis that we're going for like when it comes to this turret change. So ideally, in the next couple of weeks, as we work to get what you've seen to a point of stability and getting the co-op fully implemented, we'll do the ability system, and then we would prototype the turret system. And the turret system would be what you see here. And that would be what we also end up mirroring for the field turrets, because we need to rebuild that AI based off of what we built in Legacy and make it a little more efficient. So yeah, that's what we're working on there when it comes to the field turrets. Let me. You gonna say Durvar?
I love the look.
What do you guys think
Love
of the
the look of
turret?
that turret.
Winner Durvar.
Like that turret, honestly.
The best thing
You
I've
guys
ever
are so
seen in my
cheesy.
entire
Yeah,
life.
it is honestly the best thing I've ever seen.
I swear.
I think it's. I do like the original ones. I think they're a really cool design, but I think this new one is just a step up.
I love it. I've been pushing
so
for
many
this for
ways.
so long.
Oh yeah,
And
Like
I was able to finally come to a compromise with my technical artist, because you figure it's one of those things where he wanted to go with more of a flak, where it was like the one that's like really low to the ground. It's more like realistic, but I wanted to go more on the prototype vibes, So we were able to agree on like a hybrid, where it has some characteristics of a flak gun, but it still has that prototype inspired like base, Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. It's very because when I first saw this picture, I was like, oh, the proportions looked a little weird, but then I realized it's just because my first thought was the prototype one, and I was like, oh wait, it's much
and
smaller.
that was the biggest
get it
thing, is I
now.
didn't want to go too realistic, because there's not really a modern equivalent of an autonomous turret that like fits the role that I need in gameplay.
Yeah.
So that's when you have to make that concession of gameplay versus realism, where it's like it's still a game at the end of the day. So you have to still.
I can't wait.
I can't wait to pass this off to Jacob, our audio engineer, so he can basically do an audio pass, because we gotta port over the old legacy sounds and bring it over to this. But it's just one of those things where it's like, it's when we get that over there, it's gonna be great, because we have to do an audio pass coming up soon.
Do like a
I have to do some research, and we'll put together like an audio book, audio Bible, and then the idea is he would use that to construct how it's going to sound. Generally, I either give it to Dimitri or I have Michael do it, and they have real military experience, so I know generally how these things are supposed to sound better than I do. And they'll put together like some kind of critique or like list and send that over to the audio guys, and then from there, they're off to the races. So it always sounds amazing. Like some of the work they did on the Abrams and the MRSs, oh my god, the sound fields, and there's so much more they want to do. So like you figure it's one of the things where I need to kind of like unleash them going into the future. So then that way they can implement meta sounds, because we're not even using meta sounds, and meta sounds is kind of like a dynamic ambient system / like, I guess you could say like mixing system, like WYs. So then that way you can make like really immersive sound fields where you can have like better sound dispersion, and kind of like Battlefield or Call of Duty, where like the same sound can change based off of distance. And then you can have like sub sounds and like actual like better simulation of how sounds persist in the real world. So it's one of those things where it's, what do you think? Yeah, like armor. Perfect example. So it's one of those things where like, yeah, that's one of the things that I'm saving for like the icing on the cake once all these like core systems are baked in and established. Here, let me check my list. So then you figure, that's what I have for that. What else do we have on the agenda, Winner?
I will. We need to take questions. Did you show off? Did you show off the the building yet?
Yeah, the multiplayer building synchronization.
Oh,
and the
I'm
upgrade
so
and repair
sorry.
replication.
You're right. I'm sorry. I'm scatterbrained right now. Let me
Well,
bring that up.
putting it to stock.
No, I wrote it down backwards as well, so you're all good. So we've got that, and then questions. I am going to duck off for a bit.
You're good. Derivari, take over.
I'll still have it open and listening, but I won't be talking for
Okay,
now.
let me go ahead and bring up the large RTS test map, and I will show you guys some of the stuff I've been working on. So if I slice this up, F11 it, and go over here, one of the things that I showed off last week was the inability for walls to be upgraded and the progress on the wall builder. The wall builder was really, really temperamental with the older versions. Like, it did not replicate. We were working on some client-side prediction, and that was one of the things that we aimed to rectify, and that took up quite a bit of time going into the early part of the week, is just getting it to where it was accurate and then setting up the debug system that you see on the top left. Well, we have like dynamic segments that are being like replicated and sent out to different clients so that people understand like what pieces to draw. And then, like, you know, when you place it, it'll just do it. And then I can grab these guys. And this is also another thing that was a big push for this week, is that didn't work. Is that you couldn't right click to assist to tell other AI to help you build. If you, like, in the earlier versions that I showed over the last couple of weeks, there was no support for auto repair and auto assisting when it came to the ramifications of like a co-op game. And it didn't allow you to right click if you'd cancel a move order, which is why sometimes you'd see me stop and end a session, because we needed to kind of figure that out. So that was one of the things that we figured out going into this week, was essentially setting this up. And then just getting it to where, like, you know, getting it to where the gates work for that as well. So if I stop them and then tell them to go back, it'll work. And just, they'll find a new spot based off of where they were. And it just kind of opens. And I guess that asset was changed recently. That's weird. Yeah, I'll have to figure out why that gate was put in there. That's a debug gate. Okay, well, there's that. And then I will show the other aspect, which was the revel mode. So if I click on this wall, and that's right, the client can't cheat. Only the host can, at least right now in the earlier versions. So if I go ahead and I try and upgrade the wall, it replicates now between the host and the client. That was something else that I wasn't able to get to in the past week in terms of like getting that situated. So that was a big goal that I did this week, is getting so that would work. And the next thing was making it to where you can upgrade to tier 3, getting that situated, making sure the VFX and all that is synchronized and working. So I got that working. And the next aspect of what I was working on was making it to where revel mode would work, which isn't going to work on a client because they can't cheat. But if I apply 100% health, it'll go on the revel mode. And then if I tell my engineers to come over and repair, they will dynamically source their locations and repair in the co-op. Now, there is a desynchronization that me and Winter were looking at earlier, where sometimes when they repair, they can get stuck into the repair animation loop. So I have to figure out where in the replication it's allowing them to do that. But you can see there they go. So I have to figure out whatever's causing that, because something is causing a desynchronization when it comes to them repairing. But then they fix the moment they give another task. So that's something that I'm going to be hunting down going into Monday, is figuring out why that's happening and then permanently eradicate it. But you can see like all that's working. And then if I do this, and then build, and then cancel, and then do it again, they'll find new locations and they'll build their task. So that's working. It's mostly just related to the gates, so I have to figure out what's going on there. And I can just do this one where I apply revel. So if I do 200, then it goes to revel mode, and then I can go over here and I can repair it, and then it'll just do the same thing. It seems like it's not completely reliable when it decides to basically do the desync, I guess it's not really a desync. It's more so there's a call that's not being ran on some of the client for when to stop welding. The welding itself is over, but the animations don't stop. So I'll have to look through that and figure out what the heck's going on. So there's that, which let me see, and then let me check my notes. So we had the socks. So we also got the socks working. And I left off on basically making it to where you could get the income. So let me bring up the top-down, load in. I'll just test with the 1 because it doesn't really matter for showing that right now. And that way you guys can see it better. And you can see also now they shoot infected on sight. Is that previously they didn't understand and know who each other were. They knew they were enemies, but they didn't understand that, like, oh, I can shoot that person. So, like, if you looked at previous podcasts when I'd spawn in, there was an infected that was just standing there, and it was just kind of like, okay, that's cool. So they have some interactivity there that's going to keep getting pushed over the next couple weeks. And if I move the sock over, it does the actual emplacement. And if I click, then it gets rid of the base, like I guess you could say hologram that reserves the spot. One of the things that I'm going to have my artist do is basically condense and redesign the sock in a way, because it's really weird with the previous design, how we had sections of collision where you could walk through like this, but then if you did the upgrade, it would bounce your unit out of the way, or it would basically like send them slingshotting if they were a vehicle. So it's one of those things where, like, I'm going to have him rework this and potentially close off these areas so you can't walk through it, to just eliminate the potential for bugs, because it was just kind of weird. So you will see some changes happen to the sock. One of the things that I'll be working on going into this next week is making it to where the upgrade system that I wrote for the walls and for the gates will carry over to this, so I can get the 2 tiers of additional upgrades implemented, and then make it to where it affects the income. So that's something else I'll be doing this week, is getting it to where, yes, you get an income from this, you have the upgrades, and then it's fixing the welding issues you guys saw, and then continue battle testing that map that Derek and I have been working on to make it to where the point where you can play a full combat test. And then once we're happy with that, we move on to phase 2. Well, phase 2, which is basically we're going to be taking that concept and we're going to scale it up tremendously into the, I think it's this one. No, I am mistaken. It is the, no, it's this one. Wait, hold on. This one. The idea is that we'll be scaling it up and implementing the horde mode into this map. And this would be the one that we would actually have a real playtest on. So we're just kind of using the other one as a quick little dirty test. And then once we're happy, we'd set up the 4 ways in, get it so we can play it internally on Steam. And then the moment we can, get it to you guys so you guys can play it. And it basically just see, how does it feel? How do you like it? The biggest hurdle we have to figure out is just how to make sure we properly communicate with the Steam master server. So then that way you guys can host games on the experimental. So that'll be a little bit of a learning skill gap there. So if we were, it's easier to do it on a normal build. So we'll have to contact Valve and figure out, like, however we have to do with a Steam ID to make sure that you can actually host and play multiplayer games on a beta. Should be fine, but we'll work it out with Valve and we'll get back to you guys. Worst case, we have to just make a beta on the base game and you just have to opt in that way for the multiplayer when we get to that point. Well, we have to kind of open up some communications with Valve and figure out how they intend for us to do multiplayer, and we'll just kind of roll with the punches at that point. Let me see. That kind of wraps it up for what we have for progress this week. Let me see. Let's go ahead and roll in the questions. Unfortunately, a lot of the stuff that we did do was a lot of like mundane work, like to get the horde mode augmented and set up, so it's not as fun to look at in terms of, like, there's not like much like depth there, but it was the foundation going into every week so we can get the combat and all the other aspects functional, so then we can go and we can do the rest of the game. So yeah, that wraps up my section there. Yeah.
I'll go out on a limb and say I love the
Okay.
amount of progress that you guys have done, because it really is just a breath of fresh air to see so much progress done in admittedly such a
Yeah,
short
I
time.
always think they were always going slow. Whenever I talk to people on the public Discord, I was playing with some of the Patreon guys a couple days ago, and they were like, "Oh, you guys are so fast," and I'm like, I wish we were faster. It's like what Ephraim says, where it's just kind of like you kind of beat yourself up because you're always just trying to push yourself more and more in terms of like trying to get stuff done, to where it's like we lose perception
Yes.
of basically like, oh wait, like maybe we are doing fine, but we always try and push the line.
I get really cranky when I spend too
Same.
much time away
I'll
from
play
the
other
project.
games and then guilt trip myself to going back and working on the game. You've been there, Duravar, where I start talking about game design when we're playing fucking
I have,
World
yeah.
Warhammer, and I'm just like, oops. So
But we were playing. I remember it was a big thing when we were playing
StarCraft?
Warcraft. When we have those big.
oh yeah, you're right.
No,
yeah.
World of Warcraft. We would sit there and have those massive long hours, and then by the 6th hour, you'd start talking about game design. It's just like, but I'm just.
I know you're
okay.
trying to figure out like where do we
Just-
go next from World of Warcraft, and I'm like, well, blah blah blah, horde mode. Like Steam comment. You know what I mean? I just start talking to him randomly. And you're like, oh fuck, just kill me. We're playing games right now.
And it's just like I'll just start following you around like a lost dog. Like he knows where
No,
he's going. I
Not
believe,
at
I think.
all. I ended up reading a review or like checking something on Steam to write it down in my notebook. But yeah, no, it's the fun of doing game design. It's a never ending like wheel, but I love it. It's fun. Okay, so let's open it up for questions. Let's see what y'all have to say. I am looking at Steam, YouTube, and Discord.
I did see someone had their elusive.
Oh
hand
yeah,
up,
they
but I
probably
think
didn't
they're
get that
gone.
we don't answer questions till the end.
Yeah. Come back.
That's fine.
You
Okay,
guys
what
have
kind of
any
questions?
hands
Let's
up?
see what YouTube. I see a lot of comments on YouTube. So the pepperoni asked, could
Yeah,
the sentries
some-
have their own light system? So when you're saying a light system, you're talking about like the spotlight, right? From Legacy. I think he's talking about the spotlight.
I would assume. Yeah.
Okay.
Assume so.
I'm not against that. That's not a bad idea. I mean, we did figure out a way of making the lights a hell of a lot cheaper. So let me mull that over, and let me see what I can do on that front. Because you figure, here, you know what it is? My artist is actually on that worked on it. Let me ask him. I'm see if he thinks of a flashlight would work on his design. Next question.
What customizations and cosmetics are you? Hang on, let me move Discord out of the way. Are you guys personally looking forward to for your own?
The biggest
operator?
customization that I'm looking for is the ability for them to build and to give them the refined ability system that we did in Legacy Cepheus, and then replicate it going into the next couple of weeks. Because once we get this, what I showed you working, the next big thing is the ability system for grenades, and then I just want to get the scientist scanner, which is gonna be really cool because then you can passively farm DNA. And then I want to get the radio operator relay tower in. So then you can call in airstrikes without the radio operator always being around. And then those two can be carried over to the operator. So the idea is then that way you can kind of make these hybrids where you're almost a scientist, but you're also a medic kind of deal based off of the point allocation that we're going to give. And we'll have to balance and tweak it as needed. But that's going to provide a lot of replay value. Because even if you're not even playing it from a standpoint of playing as a third-person shooter, that's still a hero unit, the equivalent of Colonel Burton from Command & Conquer 0 Hour. They wreck face. So it's going to still be like a Winters, but way above her even. And you can customize them. So you can make a team of 2 or 3 of operators and make them, lead your squads in the battle, essentially. What other questions do we have, Derivar?
I'm just having a look. Discord. Not Discord. Yes, Discord. Big Rooney asked, can we get the lights and the sentry to rotate on a 90-degree basis when
For the
you're
turret, right? The new one?
Yeah, I'm assuming for the turret and the sentry and the light.
Yeah, I'm literally having a conversation with my technical artist to see what he can do on that. Let me see what he says, because you figure I'm imagining something like oh god, what's that game with the rotating? Is it Half-Life? Or it's it does that weird sound when it goes left to right.
I think so. I
I'll
never
pray
really
for your
played
soul.
it, so. I
don't
was
have a
never interested in
childhood.
Half-Life.
I'm sorry, it's official.
No, my childhood was
Yeah.
Command and Conquer.
That's a hard pass for me, dog.
I bet again.
Yeah, he says he says that they can mount a radar on the side, so odds are he could put a spotlight there, but it would offset a bit, but it should be fine. So, what do you guys think about that? Do you guys agree? Would you guys want a flashlight or like some kind of spotlight that automatically moves with the turret based off of what it's targeting? Got one yes. Any other yeses? Let's kind of gauge some interest here, boys and girls. Okay, we got 2 yeses, 3 yeses,
2 yeses.
4 yeses.
Not sure
Okay,
what that's meant to
so
be.
a shit ton of yeses on Discord. A shit ton of
This one
yeses on YouTube.
This
Okay,
one-
so I'll tell you what, guys. I'll get my artist to see what he can do about getting it mounted with a radar would be, because there's not really a purpose for that to have a radar in the confines of how we're using that turret. So we'll get that situated for you guys, and we'll get that going. So we'll have to just make it to where auto turns on and off based off of night. We'll just tie it into the night-day system for delegates. Okay, what other questions do we have, Durvar?
So Great White on YouTube asks, will the infected zones be made easier to operate inside of? Currently, it just seems impossible to take areas back to the 1 minute timer on infantry being in the zone.
I'm not sure I fully understand that question. So,
not sure
if
what
I'm
I
able
understand
to
that one.
infer what he's kind of getting at here, is I think he's getting at the fact of how it can kind of be tedious to retake a zone sometimes, based off of if you're not exploiting some underlying system like the MRSs or the Abrams or the Apache. It's kind of like wailing on someone, and it's just you're not really making that much headway. Is that what he's getting at? Where was this comment? Durvar? Did my internet die? Where was this comment that you
What'd
saw?
you
YouTube. Okay.
say? On YouTube.
Okay, he said. Okay, I think he said yes to what I said. So yeah, one of the ways that we're going to be tackling that, and this should be enough here, is to have it to where you have the other airstrike packages that we're going to be adding. We're adding about approximately like 6 or 7 airstrikes off the top of my head that will give you a lot greater precision and combat ability of like being able to like cordon off and like take out entire zones as you're advancing. The other part, where you go?
I think what they're talking
Oh,
about
the
is
gas
masks.
masks. I mean, the most we're doing there is we're adding it to where you can do research to increase the filter level so that you increase the amount of time that you can be in contagion zones to make it a little more accommodating for when you're entering into like a really high level like zone. You're not screwed. Like you take out one gas tower, but there's 3 other zones overlapping, so it's just GG, you're done. So yeah, that's our kind of like our process for tackling that, and that should be enough based off of like. And then one of the other ideas was having it to where the scientists would have about double the oxygen capacity of all the other people, just base entry line. And that way it makes it to where like your scientists are also some of your best soldiers for going in and cleaning out contagion zones, because they have like a closed circuit gear. You know, you get a level 3 filter, they're always going to be 2 to 3 times the time that like a traditional Cirque soldier, where a traditional Cirque soldier might cap out at like 6 minutes. A scientist is 12 minutes, 15 minutes, kind of deal. And that way you're able to send these scientist teams in with like the HK-43 and the flamethrowers and just pacify a zone is the idea. So yeah, that's generally the gist that we're going in to rectify that. If you feel like it's still a problem at that point, you'd have to bring it up after we get more closer to implementing the pandemic systems, and we could sit down and discuss that. What other questions do we have?
Let me have a look.
Oh, we got one on YouTube, on Discord. Sorry.
So, great.
How difficult will the horde map
Really?
be, considering the difficulties of 2 maps is vastly different, with one not spawning any juggernauts and the other throwing them all at you? like round 2. Yeah, that was Michael. I think he's horrible when it comes to like torturing people. I think he did that intentionally because he was like, they'll get smalls by level 2. I'll tell you what, I'll take a look at that when it comes to the spawn tables this time around, and I'll see what we can do about making it a little bit more easier to like adapt to. Because I do get that piece of criticism quite a bit, and we're gonna have to be porting over the old horde maps and implementing the newer system that I wrote with like this new process. So when we get to that point, I'll get with Michael and we'll come to a consensus of that, because there is a big disparity between how the 2 horde maps are implemented, and it just it kind of annoys a lot of people. The current horde map that you saw is not meant to be like finite. It's internal. It's for playtesting on the experimental, but it's not meant for like release. Like that horde map is just meant for people to playtest the game and give feedback. So I wouldn't take it seriously in terms of like its layout or its design. It's going to be kind of like a sandbox of different environments just to stress test the systems. Oh, what other questions do we have?
Grey Wolf on YouTube asks, I was thinking appearance and aesthetic you guys wanted for your own guys, but the mechanics were interested. Anything on the appearance side you want for your own
You
guys?
talking about the Cirque?
I think so.
What is this question?
Once on YouTube.
No. When it comes down to the Cirque, the idea is that they're finite. So like we got them to the point where we're happy with them and they're situated. And the next stage would be doing that towards the infected and doing that towards the civilians. As it stands right now, the civilians and the dynamic civilian groups and the infected are the only ones that have not gotten a total reskin or like facelift. When we get that situated, then the next phase we'll be basically taking it in chunks. So right now, but we're trying to see if we can get some more face references for the civilians. So Michael's kind of stalling on that by doing the civilian weapons and dynamic civilian weapons. So we can try and get some face models for the civilians to have him save time, scan those faces in, and then be able to use that for the civilians and for the dynamic civilian groups and for the basis of infected. Because once you do one, you kind of done all of them. So it's kind of like an umbrella in terms of like ballooning, in terms of the amount of assets we're going to be working on. So as we wait for that and we're getting approval and talking to people that want to have their faces in the game, he's working on the weapons while I work out those finer details. So yeah, the infected are going to change. The dynamic civilian groups are changing. The ambient civilians are changing. And the Cirque and the operators are the only ones that are done at this point. In terms of like, 1.0, they're situated. What else do we have?
Computer user IT on YouTube. Will there be any visuals on the infected units, depending on the stages, like them in feeling sick and showing symptoms?
There will be some basic preliminary ones, but I can't see there being greater depth in them until a later time. That's going to be more of an icing on the cake thing. But when we have, I would say sometime after we release co-op, that'll be one of the major goals that we do, is getting a character modeler that can make those growths and make different stages of the infected.
Hang on, someone just asked a very interesting question on YouTube, but
Huh?
I'm not sure how.
What's the question?
I'm kind of just reading this one to myself. Hang on. Is it bad? I trust you guys with how you're developing the games. Developing of the games been going compared to a company like Offworld, which gives very little to no update blogs on how development goes. It's not bad that you trust a game development company.
I have no
never
opinion
bad.
on this.
Like, from going off of personal experience, like I have really bad trust issues with game development companies. Before I met Robert here, and before I got my grubby little fingers in on everything, I sat for a while and I was debating whether to get Cepheus. This was probably 2 years ago now, because of certain games that won't be named, having burned me several times with early access and indie development as a whole. I sat and I was like, do I do this? Do I do this? And then it was during a podcast that I hosted ages ago, where I actually got the chance to sit down and talk with Robert and talk with Michael. And I got to actually know them then, on a relatively basic level. And then they invited me in to actually talk to them privately. And after getting to know them and after actually knowing the dedication and all the time and effort they're putting in and the transparency they believe in, that's when I started to really open up and be a bit more trusting in them. And now, it's like I sit here today and I go, yeah, I am grateful for the fact that I've had the opportunities that I've had to get to know them on the level that I know them, to sit here and say this company and these development team is definitely a team you can put your trust into, because they're not going to screw you over. They're not going to feed your, talk your ear off and say, oh yeah, we're doing this, we're doing this, we're doing this. No, when they say they're doing something, because that is just Robert's fundamental look on game development here as a director, as a project director, is he says he's going to do
It
something.
might take some time, though. Sometimes.
And
Can I
Yeah.
chime
takes
in on
time.
this one as well?
Yeah, go on.
Like, mainly like me, when I graduated, I knew I didn't want to go into AAA, mainly because of just the state of the industry. I talked to a bunch of people. It just wasn't something I wanted to get into, and I spent years looking for a development team that was, as hungry as I am, wanting to make a game. And I encountered, before meeting Robert and the rest of the team, I encountered a lot of small teams that either never got their project off the ground because of creative differences or just internal strife, or it was just a guy with an idea, artists, into creating free content for him. And when I met Robert, I realized it's like, guys are serious. They're really making a game. And spent hours. The first time we came up with the idea for Cepheus Protocol, what was it, like a 3, 4, 5,
Probably a
probably
lot
more
longer
hour
than
meeting
that,
we
buddy.
were just yeah, it was an entire couple of days where we were just spitting out ideas, and I was like, okay, these guys, I have a job, so I'm cool with paying bills, but these guys want to build a game, and this is something I kind of been wanting to be a part of. And I've been doing this for like 7 years almost now, and it's because I finally found a development team that wanted to get, and I've trusted them, and I've put a lot of time and effort into this, and I still want to keep even though tough, I still want to continue to put time into it because these guys gave me my first shot. Not only that, it was something I wanted to do, was build a game from the ground up, be part of a founding team that pulled their sleeves up and released their own game. We didn't really have too much
Sweat
investment other than our
yeah, they call it
efforts
sweat
and our talent.
liquidity. It's like kind of like Minecraft, where the idea is that you just kind of put your own time into it until it comes to fruition, and then you profit from it long term. But it's the same thing that like what you guys are getting into is like, I'm more negative. So it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, I feel like it's one of those situations where we're at least honest and transparent about what's going on, and at the same time, we do make mistakes. And when we do make a mistake, we're willing to admit we made that mistake so we can fix it. So I think that gives us some uniqueness there. but at the same time, it's like we're not perfect, and we're always going to keep rolling with the punches and figure out things based off of what you guys tell us in terms of critiques. I mean, you guys were the ultimate reason why we decided to do the rebuild. You know, it was a long-term game over short. It was like a long-term investment over short, where it was like, okay, like we're getting enough feedback and criticism online where it's like, you know, we need to take the time now rather than later to rebuild some of these core systems from what we've learned over the last couple of years and you know, do it more efficiently. And from the onset, make sure we're implementing co-op so we're fulfilling our obligations that people have, you know, wanted for us to do. You know, so I think that this is a long term coming in terms of like what we're showing now for a lot of people, where it's like, okay, like they're actually showing co-op, they're actually showing their progress, they're showing the good and the bad, and it's the transparency, the trust that like people understand, like it's not just you throw a bunch of stuff on a screen and it just comes together. It is an art form in every meaning of the word. So we're all along for this ride, and we're gonna make sure that we're documenting it and showing you guys our as we get there. So it's gonna be fun. Yeah, it's just one of those things where it's just I love it. You know, it's hard, but it's rewarding, and that's the best thing at the end of the day is when people come to you and they're like, "Oh my god, I love your game! It's so cool." Like I went to Best Buy the other day, and there were people that knew about the game. And I made the mistake of mentioning it to them. I was like, oh, like they were like, why are you buying this replacement monitor? Because I always bitch about the monitor I have because I can't see based off the contrast. So I got a newer one, and they were asking why I got it. And I mentioned I worked on Cepheus, and they were like, we're going to show you the monitors right now. And it was like they knew the game. So it was just kind of like, that was like the coolest thing ever for me of just basically like meeting someone that played the game and then just seeing their enthusiasm, you know? Best fucking thing ever. So yeah, but we need to start actually going to expos too, like in PAX, so we can meet y'all and like just have that kind of fun and engagement too. That'd be another. That was
I
fun.
think the last one
that was in LA,
like shortly before
DreamHack.
COVID.
But they closed down. They don't do that one
Yeah.
anymore. So we're gonna have to start going to PAX West and PAX
I
East in
know.
Chicago, and in Seattle, and then I want to go to Gamescom. So that's our big like goal. Is I want to start going to those events and having a presence there, so people that do go to those events can come and talk to the developers in person and play the game, and we show off some of the more recent, like newer content. Maybe we save stuff just for those events. I think that'd be really fun. So it's one of those things where we're just kind of working towards as we get this co-op thing situated. It's starting to kind of have more of a presence online, which has been a real big push for these podcasts, is to be able to sit down with you guys and just show you what are we doing every week. You know, some weeks are slower, some weeks are faster. Last week was a fucking banger, I'll tell you that. Oh my god, last week was so much stuff to show. But you figure it's one of those things where like you figure we'll definitely hit you guys with a lot more next week. And let me see. What other questions do we have? Because we gotta start wrapping this up soon. So what's next, boys?
So computer user IT on YouTube asks one more just out of curiosity: will we get any other giant living flesh abominations in the future?
Yeah.
Like any
So
scribbles?
I'm saving more infected variations after the so we're calling the rebuild Cepheus Protocol Escalation. It's basically like the new title name. That's 1.3, the conclusion of 1.3 with co-op and all the other stuff. So when that's done and we shift into the co-op, it's going to be when the co-op is done, it's going to be a reinvestment to look into getting we need another character artist and modeler that can do the monsters that we're looking for. We have a backlog of concepts made for different like monsters and whatnot, and it's just a matter of we're kind of pacing ourselves when we get to that point so we can invest the money in that direction. But yeah, that is something that we're looking into. What else?
I've even
Oh yeah,
personally thrown
Durivars
my
are
own
making
2
some
cents in,
monsters on
but,
ZBrush.
I think the stuff that I've come up with is kind of like
That's not bad. I showed it to Michael, and he was like, "What the fuck? Did he make that with AI? Like, how do you do that?" And then we were just sitting there, just like, "How the hell did he learn this? Like, is he just like a black belt in character modeling, and he's been hiding it the whole time?" So even Michael was like, "What the hell is going on?"
no, it's just like,
Okay,
I don't know.
but yeah, no. So, Yeah, he liked it.
I don't know how to respond to
What
that
other
one.
questions do we have?
I appreciate it. Okay, so someone asked, are you guys adding more items like merch line?
No. For the time being, I'm not adding any more merch for right now. Like, if you have a suggestion, I'll take it into consideration. But I don't really have any ideas of anything else to add because one of the things I want to do is get a graphic artist to design better T-shirts and whatnot. But that's later down the pipe. If you have an idea, I'll look at it. But I can't guarantee we'll be adding any more merch anytime soon. Who wrote that, by the way?
That was
Buffalo. Okay. So if he
Buffalo.
replies back or just
Buffalo
DM me, if you
1137.
have an idea I haven't thought of, I'll look at it. But I don't have anything right now. Set winner.
Okay.
You missed everything.
Everything. I know.
Oh,
I
no, I
was
saw you.
in the
You were
chat,
moderating
sort
the
of trying to
Discord
follow
chat. I dig
along.
it. Okay, so let's see what we have here. So YouTube. So great freedom. It's basically the same thing as the transparency. And then the game did need a rebuild just to kind of capitalize on all the new changes that we've done. So he agreed with us there. Anything on Discord before we start to get to a wrapping point?
Not much on
Remy
Discord.
asked when the co-op is slated to release.
Remy,
And the idea would be is that it's not going to be a formal or like an official release like immediately, but it's going to be around. Like I would say that we'll have something that you guys can play ideally the next week or two. Like based off of what we've shown today, we will know. Like this is going to be internal. It's going to be that horde map that I showed you previously, and it's just going to be like an idea, like a dirty like map you can jump in there and test and play test. Yeah, and that's just going to be the horde map. If you rewind previously in the podcast, you'll see what I'm talking about. When we're talking like a full on like pandemic, that's going to probably be at least a month at this point because you figure we're taking every stage and like we're pacing ourselves in terms of making sure we don't make the same mistakes and learning from our previous like issues that we made in the past. So the biggest thing is making sure each section of development gets enough attention to detail and we give you guys the time to look at it and give us feedback, on each aspect as we go. Because like the spotlight for the century is a good idea. So it's like one of those things where my artist is working on it right now. Like literally. So he'll probably have something in the show going into Monday, Tuesday. And by next podcast, I'll actually be able to show an image. So it's one of those things where like I like just kind of making sure we're taking the time to just hit every point. And just like the wall builder and everything else, we made the mistake early off in development, or we try to do too much with not enough QA and not enough like kind of fundamental systems programmed in. And it was an amateur beginner mistake where you just kind of spread yourself too thin and you do all these systems and they end up being so interwoven and synchronized to where like they're not abstract and they're not modular. So it makes it to where like making new systems and adding like new functionality is cumbersome, and it takes like an encyclopedia to figure out how to work within the confines of the SDK. So this is kind of like one of those things where we've just been tackling is like looking at our old code base, not taking a single ounce of it, but taking the concept of what we did and applying it with this new build up, with this new rebuild. So everything you're seeing is a new game. New engine base it's built on, new code base. That's not really. Like, maybe there's a couple lines of code that were brought over, but they're so trivial it doesn't matter. Like the entire order of operations, the entire game has been reprogrammed from the ground up from what we had previously. So it's a little bit strenuous, a little bit slow at times, but you guys are seeing the progress, I'm sure. Ideally, I'm going to try and get Chris and some of the more other cats in here next week. Chris has been sick for the last couple of weeks. He's just messaging me right now, which is why I'm mentioning it, because I do want to get more voices in here. And then maybe I'll try and kidnap Derek more often so he can come in here and talk about programming, so I'm not the only one ever talking about it. Yeah, I hate being the only one that talks. I hate you.
But you're good at it.
To Gulag with you, Winter. Take him away, Derivar.
To the gulag.
Oh,
I will.
okay.
The Gulag Room.
Okay.
Let's see. Oh, Alpha Legion was saying he wouldn't mind ordering a shirt with a black T-shirt with the patient 0 on it. Oh, so Chelsea. Okay, I'll write that down. There's one for I survived Cepheus Protocol's early access. I thought that was so funny at the time. But it's so true. And then
Somebody brought up propaganda
that would be
posters for
so
Cirque,
cool.
and I was like,
Okay,
that would
let me-
actually be sick.
let me
That would
let me
honestly be
message my
cool.
writer and see if he can come up with some like propaganda Cirque art, and we'll see what we can do there. 'Cause that's actually a really cool idea. I do like that.
It was Earth Alchemist.
Yes.
Props to Earth
Wherever
Alchemist.
that what came from, I will notate that and bring it up to him when I talk to him. Jule7, do you already know how long the campaign should be when the game is ready? Right now we're aiming for about 4 to 6 hours, give or take. That's just based off of our scripts and our game design docs. You know, it's probably going to be longer, but don't quote me on that because again, I'm taking this as like strides or like a leaps, whatever you call it. So once we get to 1.3 and it's done with escalation, then 1.4 is world events, the factions, Pearson, Natalie, and then the campaign. So, and a huge part of that is going to be the campaign. So I'm going to say somewhere around there, but it could be longer. Because the biggest thing is that the value proposition in my mind for the game to be 1.0 complete is having at least a 4 to 6 hour campaign, having the operators mode, having the pandemic mode, having the horde modes, and then having the customization for the operators. And then in my mind, the game is 1.0 ready to be released out of early access. And then we move on to the next phase of development, which would be post-launch support. Okay, what other question do we have, boys?
Yep, just-
Okay.
I got
There's a
nothing
couple on
Discord.
YouTube, and then if we don't get any more, we will start to wrap it up. So let's see. Will there be flares? A unit that can launch at flares at night would look awesome. There is already a unit that can launch flares. It's the Assault. It works to basically be a spotting mechanic where it will essentially shoot up a 360-degree like radial vision, like in traditional RTSs, but it's not blocked by structures. So then that way you can see what's around you and use it to basically plan if they're about to counterattack you. So yeah, the Assault does have it. We've talked about adding it to the structures, but it's just been that. There hasn't been really that much push on it. Because with the old legacy system for abilities, there's a little bit of truce and hard to do those kind of things. With the new ability system, it is possible if there's a push for it. Because theoretically, we could have it to where like the Bradley or like the Striker could deploy flares based off of one of their secondary mounts. But we're that's more of a stretch goal, kind of like wish list thing. It's not mission critical, but you know, we'll look into. Yeah.
Need to get like the smoke launcher deployers. Get the Abrams like popping smoke and then reversing out, and leaving all
you're
the infantry to
horrible.
die.
Smoke launchers are definitely on the list, though.
No, I would never. Look, Abrams
Well, we
are
have the
expensive,
smoke
okay?
launcher. It was actually
Infantry are not.
made and we made this smoke launcher for Legacy, and then when we decided to do the rebuild, it's just been sitting on a repo because every single vehicle in the entire game has a smoke launcher upgrade for a defensive slot that allows you to basically fire smoke to kill visibility, and then the only way you can see through it is via like the thermals. So like the spec ops can see through it, but nobody else can. Correct me if I'm wrong. Does the Abrams have the thermal? Yeah. So
But like
technically,
IRL, yeah.
Yeah, technically we'd have to
I
look
believe
back
so,
on
yeah.
that one because it was one of the last things that we did before we decided to like rebuild the game in December, early January. So it's one of those things where like we'll have to look at that because that I definitely would want to make sure some of the vehicles and some of the other stuff can use and see through the smoke. The idea was that it was going to be the spec ops to start with, and then we would expand it. Okay, let me see what else we have. Thank you, Alpha Legion, for jumping in and asking your questions. We greatly appreciate you. Let's see. Anything else? Oh yeah, no, it's a constant passion of love for us, Pepperoni, to basically just kind of see the game through and get it over these last hurdles. Now we need T-72s for the Op 4 faction, no lasers. Oh my god. Are you talking about the lazy general from fucking Command and Conquer? Oh man, that thing was OP. It would just shoot down any projectile. Or like the Air Force general with like the stupid like anti-laser thing that they would have. It would just like knock entire missiles out of the sky. Oh my god, was that broken?
Good.
I would hate
I
playing against
loved
that
that thing.
person because you'd have to just mass out flak guns. Because the stingers and everyone else was just useless. And it was, you just traded. Yeah, but you
I
just had to
played that
trade, and it
person.
was really bloody annoying. Like I hated when someone played the Air Force General in 0 hour. It was like the pinnacle of like torturing yourself. Yeah, latest defense ready. Yeah, God help me. I love that game though. I'll never. Well, yeah, you said the multiplayer was turned off on that game, Duravar. We could probably find a third party server or do it on Amachi and do the land feature. Or maybe Parsec might work.
Yeah. I'll have to do some research on it.
Do you know SCP-5K update? What is he talking about, Duravar?
So the SCP-5K update, in the new update for the SCP-5K game, it introduces the
is.
Flesh That Hates. So the Flesh That Hates is one of the more lethal SCPs. It's essentially, it's like a virus. It's
Huh?
how do I explain it? It kind of
Is it? Yeah, is it like
Is
the
it
thing?
like the thing?
yeah, a bit like the
And it's
thing.
just like it
yeah.
infects people. Can it
It
infect multiple
turns
people?
you
Or is it
into
just
things.
singular?
It can. Well, there's an entire town in the SCP universe. There's an entire town in Russia that's just gone because of the Flesh That Hates.
Xenobius like
Read your goddamn self.
Yeah.
Okay.
How do I?
I feel you. Okay, so I haven't played it. We'll have to.
Not okay. So
Yeah.
not SCP-610. So hold on.
He's talking about
which update are
SCP-5K
you
on
talking
Flesh
about?
That Hates. They had a funny idea: flesh tentacles pulling the whole ship to the mainland.
Yeah, that's
I'll have to look
yeah,
into
that's
that
the
game.
Flesh
I
That
am not
Hates.
aware of it. If you don't know, I'll have to look into it. But it's one of those things where I've seen it on Steam.
I've played
Yeah.
I've played the update. It is a damn good update. Like they've done the Flesh That Hates really well. It's just really hard to explain the Flesh That Hates because it's a bit of it's a funny sort of thing to talk about because the 610 is so in depth. Like it was
Okay. I'll
really
have to look
well
into
done.
that one. Let's see. Okay. Well, why don't we wrap it up there, Winter? You want to give the outro?
Oh, I need my epic Fox Sports music. Thank you all so much for coming. It's been a great game today. No, shut up. Thank everyone for coming to the podcast. Hopefully you enjoyed, and if you didn't, we'll do better. I promise. If you have any questions, of course, please feel free to reach out. We're all happy to answer them. And we'll see you all next week, where we will show you off more things, and you'll be all impressed all the
You're so
time, or
cheesy.
else.
My
Or
God.
else.
if you want to support development,
Or else
check
we
out
will
our support packs on Steam. Check out the book on Amazon. I mean, anything helps towards basically helping to push development. And yeah, thank you guys so much for coming, and we will see you guys next